Mwokozi wetu Kristu yu hai na mzima, Bwana kashinda kifo. Amefufuka, Bwana amefufuka, amefufuka.
Approach to so that we can understand more of our responsibilities. Thank you very much and welcome. Thank you very much. I want to invite Mr. Simon, who is the national coordinator in the diocese of Civic, to introduce the key speakers during this meeting to us. And Simon, you can also introduce yourself before you introduce yourself.
God is good, and all the time, Tumsifu Yesu Kristo. Let me first of all express my sincere gratitude for the kind of invitation and warm welcome that we received from the CJPC leadership in this parish, and more specifically from our Father in charge. Thank you very much, and we can't afford to take it lightly. Secondly, before I say anything else, I would wish to convey the greetings from our apostolic administrator, Bishop David Kamau. He is aware you are here and what you are doing and what you are discussing. And thirdly, I would also wish to invite to pass the regards of Father Emmanuel Buge, the CJPC chaplain in the Archdiocese of Nairobi, and he is also aware of that. Lastly, it is me, and I'm very, 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 very happy to see you today, coming to listen, because listening is one of the skills that is very important for you, so that you can be in a position to make an informed decision. We are here at the invitation of the Catholic Justice and Peace Commission. And this body operates at the auspices of the Kenya Conference of the Catholic Bishops. It is guided by the vision to work for a just and prosperous society. Under that theme, we have a number of programmatic areas that we operate in. And if you permit me a minute, I can enumerate them on our programmatic areas where we work. Number one, we work for the lenten campaign. Every year, the church, like today, after this, we are going to Mombasa so that we can finalize the whole program for the next year, which will be launched on 23rd of February. Lenten campaign, we come with 5 topics during these 40 days, which really talks about the state of the nation and our Lord and citizens and Christians. Number 2, we operate or we work. Another problematic area of the Catholic Justice and Peace is creating awareness on human trafficking. Number 3, election observation. We are heading to election this year or next year, because if you try to count, we have less than 365 days. Because whether we like it or not, we have a president who has finished his 2 years constitutional mandate, and his term is coming to an end on 9th of August the year 2022. So when he finished 2 constitutional terms, he has to go. So we must participate in election observation to ensure we have a free, fair, and credible election. God is good. Mungu ni mwema. How many are those? How many are those? This is not a preaching, this is a seminar. In a seminar, a facilitator just facilitates and then you listen. The number 3, we talk about democracy and good governance. And that's the reason why we are here. We are the only body in the church that is mandated to see there is good governance, principles of good governance are adhered, and through that, another programmatic area strength, which is the reason why we are here. After we see or after we discuss the good governance, we conduct the civic education. God is good. And civic education is not the voter education. Thereafter, we talk about the lobbying and advocacy. We see the areas where we can talk to our different stakeholders, to our government bodies, and kadhalika. Without much further ado, even me, I'm here today to listen. When I was here for a certain information, I was approached and I was requested to reach to 2 people who will come and share with you. And when they share with you, you become an instrument of change. You become an instrument of transformation in the society. So whatever you're going to get from our facilitators, you take it to your small Christian community, you take it to your place of work, you take it to your family, and you take it to wherever you go, even if it is in a public transport. Mungu ni mwema. Before I invite our speakers, allow me to read this, please. I only spent 2 minutes. I'm sorry I didn't type it. I was trying to do it here. The church is above all the people of God. It will be long to identify the church only within its hierarchy. It is in this context that the church is seen to be the conscience of the state or the society, and is concerned for all of the common good. All Christians and people are invited in this important process to a new and better Kenya. We, as a CJPC or Catholic Justice and Peace Commission, make an appeal to you, which was made by John Paul II, who is a saint now, in his encyclical Christi Fidelis Seals, or the Christ for the lay freedom. And he is saying, and I quote, public life is for everybody and by everybody. Politics conceived as a public service of the whole community should not be regarded as an worthy service to Christians. To withdraw from political responsibility for the sake of looking forward to an eternal city which is in heaven is to refuse to build the kingdom of God and to make it really present amongst us. It is a mistake to think that because we have no lasting city, but a sick city which is to come, we are entitled to shrink on earthly responsibility. Catholic Justice and Peace now is therefore encouraging all of us to exercise our political right wisely and responsibly as regards how we vote when the time comes. People get the representative they deserve. If you deserve poor leaders, if you deserve the poor leaders, so you shall get them. And I would like to say this. People who consider themselves God and their electorate, those are the people that you should be looking for the time of public interest, or the people who put public interest rather than for their own. When the time of voting comes, you should look for people who respect the rights of others and with regard to their properties. Number 3, we should look for people who promote partnerships between the government, religious bodies, and the parents in all our areas. Number 4, we should look for people who respect religious beliefs, and it is important here to give some serious considerations. We have some representatives who advocate for the anti-lives, nakadhalika. So we should look for people who respect religious groups or beliefs and the importance of life. We should also try to get the genuine people who have genuine integrity, moral courage, in cause of truth and justice, and who are competent for their posts as entrusted in them. This is our duty, and we will get our leaders that we deserve. God is good. Now it is my heart's mission to present to you our facilitators today. And our first facilitator, today we are going to break the law. We always say that it is fast. Our first presenter today, we are not going to go with the ladies first. We will go with the men first because the men were there before. He is a gentleman, he is a Kenyan, and he is a lawyer by profession, and he is an ethical leader, and he is a person who pursues the family values. He dearly holds them, and he dearly holds the common good for all and the principles of the good governance. Allow me and help me to welcome the only and only lawyer in our room today for the time being, Charles or Mr. Charles Ajao. Makofi bwana. You can take that. Thank you. The second presenter will be a lady who says the way it is. She is a mother. She says how it is when it comes to the issues of governance. She is a daughter of Yahweh. She would like to see, or it's her intention, to see women here meddling or being regarded or highly regarded than men. So she is a fighter of women's rights and the women movement, and she has built that movement for a very long time. Help me to welcome the one and only, the woman who says how it is, Madam Daisy Amdani. Makofi kwake. And then at this juncture, I'm going to start the mic to the MC so that the father can say something. And then from there, Adama will go straight away to the point. Thank you and God bless you. Open your ears, take your notes, note down your questions, because this is going to be a very engaging activity, because you need to go back to your small Christian community, to your jumuiyas, to your groups, and disseminate this information. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Simon. You also deserve a clap. So we welcome our guest, Dr. Welcome. We are ready and very willing to hear what you have to say to us. I can see the parish priest is no longer here. He's already moved. We wanted to give him an opportunity. Oh, why you requested to you can call me. Okay. So just bear with us for a few minutes.
The crowd is also here. What does this show? That faith seems to have literally come into take care for the common good. We are in a country where you walk into a conservative home. You step out of the house, the road is so bad. This shows that we are a people of devotees whose faith hardly goes into the daily life.
And therefore there seem to be two compartments. So my remark at the beginning of this session, listening to our visitors, is really that we want to make people aware, make people taste that faith in Jesus Christ, risen, present, here in the church, in me, in you, in the world, in everything that happens, is a must, is a way to verify that it is true. And living an experience, a human experience that attracts others. So, Charles McGee said in a French writer said that in the middle of the chaos, in the middle of the Roman Empire, the oppression of the Roman Empire, Jesus came. And what did he do? Did he fight against the Roman Empire? No, he started Christianity. And Christianity means life.
From him, picking mics and sanitizing people handed over. Yes, for the MC.
Yes. This concern for the common is still like something very far from the perception that the faith leads into it. That's why also we wanted our to help us appreciate, even the beginning, what the value, what is the ask, what our faith provokes us to do. So it is a responsibility that, as I repeated very many times in this church, in our presence in this society, our presence of a Christian society is a blessing. It needs to be here. It needs to be over. So very good. And I hope many more people who are here to listen to you. We shall do on their behalf.
Thank you very much, Father Alfonso, for your comments. Now we want to get the main session, and I want to invite Lawyer Charles Kanjama to take us through the first session. Please, can we put our hands together and give him a clap to welcome him. Charles, karibu sana.
Okay, thank you for the warm welcome. God is good all the time. And all the time. God is good. And that is His nature. Thank you, Father, for the introductory words and the prayer. Thank you to Simon for inviting us here, to my co-panelist or speaker, Daisy and Danny, to all of you present, parishioners, members of CJBC, Christians at large. I'm delighted to have been invited to speak about rights and responsibilities of the citizen. So the topic is about citizenship, and it is about social concern. I think Father has put it very well, that as Christians we are kind of very focused on our personal relationship with God, which is what the life of prayer is about. And sometimes we have to keep being reminded that that personal encounter with God that Christ invites us to demands as a necessary consequence that we reach out and we go to others and we impact the people around us, the environment, and the community around us. And as I start on the topic, I just wanted to reflect on something that you see in the Gospels when Jesus comes and he begins his public ministry. In the Gospel of John, Jesus is, first of all, he encounters these two disciples, probably John and Andrew, and the story is narrated early in the Gospel of John. This is the first encounter of Jesus with his disciples. So two of them had been disciples of John the Baptist. They had been following John the Baptist because he had been preaching, baptizing, and apparently in the Israel of that time, during the sabbatical year, every 7 years, people would take long holidays or vacations from their work. And so some of the people who became disciples of Jesus during the sabbatical year, they decided to go and listen to John the Baptist and spend some time listening to him. And the story is narrated in the Gospel of John, chapter 1, how after the baptism of Jesus in the Jordan, he spends 40 days in the desert or in the wilderness. He's walking by, and John the Baptist points out to Jesus and says, "Behold the Lamb of God." And these disciples of his, they are fascinated by what John the Baptist is saying, but they don't take any action. They continue listening to John the Baptist. The next day, when John the Baptist is again talking and they are surrounding him, he sees Jesus passing by, and he mentions, second day, again, "Behold the Lamb of God." And this time, John and Andrew, almost like John the Baptist had to slap them and tell them, "Just follow the film." And they follow Jesus. And John the Evangelist narrates the story. We hear, at least the scholars tell us of the Bible, that he wrote the Gospel of John about the year 90 AD. And according to historians, Jesus died around the year 30 AD. So this is more than 60 years later. John was a teenager when he met Jesus. And more than 60 years later, he remembers when he met Jesus. It was 4 p.m. It was about 4 p.m. in the afternoon. He says it was about the 10th hour. So John and Andrew go, and they follow Jesus. And Jesus stands back to them, and he asks them, "Who are you looking for?" And they ask him something, "Master, where are you going?" And he tells them, "Come and see." And actually, when you read the Gospels, you notice that the first invitation of Jesus to the people of Israel who are listening to his teaching is come. The first message is a message of discipleship. Come, learn from me. Be close to the vine. If the branches are close to the vine, I am the vine, you are the branches. Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood. Most of the gospel is about the path of discipleship, which is about come. Which is what happens when we come to church on Sunday. We come to listen to Jesus. And as Christians, we are used to this part of Christianity. Come to me. Come to Christ. Come to God. Listen to him. Spend time with him. Living waters will flow. Here you have the source of living waters. That's what we tend to do. But you then notice that at the end of the public life of Jesus, actually even in the middle of the public life in Luke chapter 10, I think chapter 9 and chapter 10, he starts now training his disciples to go out. You notice he tells them, go out 2 by 2 to the land around here, to the villages, carry no staff, no haversack, just go with your sandals and stay in one house. So he starts training them on apostolate. So the first thing is come, discipleship. And then at the end of his public life, after his passion, his suffering and death, his resurrection, you notice in all of the synoptic gospels, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the same story. When Jesus is now in this intensive training of his disciples, last 40 days before he leaves them and ascends into heaven, in his bodily form, leaves them for good. He's focusing now on training them to go out. And that is why the Great Commission we tend to refer to as the message that Jesus gives in Matthew 28, verse 19 to 20. The last recorded words of Jesus in the Bible. on the day of the ascension. Go out to the whole world, proclaim the good news, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. So this is what apostolate is. This is what it means to be an apostle, to go out. So it's like fundamentally at the heart of Christianity, there are two movements. First, come to me, learn from me. And then second, go out. And this discussion we're going to be having for the next few minutes is about this dimension of going out. Going out to the whole world, social concern. And it's interesting that we have to emphasize this idea of going out because of what Father has said. That many times, even in our Christian encounter, there is a selfish gene. There is a gene of selfishness that sometimes is very strong within us. We focus on ourselves. We focus on our own road to heaven. I want to get to heaven. And maybe we focus on a few people around us because they are members of our family, or if I'm happy and they're happy, we are good. And that tends for many people to be the limit of their social concern. So much so that in the early years of Christianity, one of the criticisms, it was not a fair criticism, but it was a criticism nonetheless, of the first Christians, was that these Christians, they only think about the next world, the kingdom of heaven. You see, for them, for Christianity, this world is a place which is not our home. It's not our home. We are just wayfarers. We're on the journey. We are journeymen and women. And our home is in the next world. So some of the pagans started criticizing the Christians that they are not interested in improving the condition of the world which they are in. Because for them, this is just barabara, ninjia tunapitia. I'm just passing by. So why should I so focus on this world? And yet, our true happiness is where? It's in the next world. So why focus on this world? And of course, this was a misreading of the Christian scriptures. Because Jesus, in his teachings, which were repeated to his disciples, keeps on telling them, you are the light of the world. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13 to 16. You are the salt of the world. But if the salt has lost its taste, its taste, what shall make it salty again? You are the light of the world. A city built on a hilltop cannot be hidden. So even a lamp or lantern, if it is on a table, it gives light to the house. So when Jesus preaches to his disciples, he's actually telling them, you can't afford to think about yourself only. When you have a lamp or a lantern and you put it in a dark house, it cannot stop the rays of that light of the lamp from spreading to the entire house. It can't stop it. It's impossible to restrain the goodness of the lamp or the light of the lamp. And so this idea of social concern is actually deeply embedded in the Gospels. And yet, on so many occasions, we have to keep being reminded about it because it's so easy to forget. One of my favorite saints, and it should be a favorite saint for most of us, is Saint Augustine of Hippo. Saint Augustine was born around the year 365 AD. This is 18th centuries ago, almost. And he died in 430 AD. And one of the great things about Saint Augustine is that he was an African saint. He became bishop of a place in Algeria, in North Africa. So he was an African. And it's called Hippo, Saint Augustine of Hippo. And he started his life as a pagan. His mother was a Christian, his father was a pagan, he was not baptized in his childhood, and he tried all kinds of things until eventually, because of the prayers of his mother, Saint Monica, he converted and became a Christian, and after that a great saint and a great philosopher. church and one of the four great fathers of the Western church. So he's really prominent in theology and philosophy. And one of the books he wrote is called The City of God. It's a big book, and I read that book several years ago. And it's a very powerful statement. He says, two loves of man created two cities. The love of man for God, even to contempt of self, created the heavenly city. And the love of man for himself, even to contempt of God, created the earthly city. And so the entire book that is the city of God is now trying to describe how this city of God and this city of man have been contending for supremacy throughout history, from the time of Adam and Eve, or from the time of Cain and Abel. And he says that Cain belongs to this earthly city, and Abel, Seth, belongs to the Shem belongs to the earth, to the heavenly city. So the point is, it's an interesting book. I enjoyed reading it, but it still falls into that kind of like division, that separation between the heavenly city and the earthly city. And the message has always been that we as Christians have to remember that we are citizens of that heavenly city, the new Jerusalem, the new heaven and the new earth, which are not yet here with us. And because of that, there is, I insist, such a strong drive among us as Christians to focus almost exclusively on the heavenly city, that we don't do enough to build the earthly city. And that is why St. Thomas Aquinas, who is the other great philosopher or theologian that is recognized in the church, he lived in the 13th century. He was born in 1225 AD and he died in 1274 AD, and is considered a great theologian. And that is why St. Thomas Aquinas, in one of his writings, his greatest book is called the Summa. In one of his writings, he says that those who are happy in heaven are those who have learned to be happy in this world. Because for many people, for many Christians, the assumption is that paradise is the place we are going to. In this world, you have to suffer, like this rich man who was the opposite. He was enjoying life in this world until he had to suffer in the next. And so the mentality has been that you have to suffer in this life so that you have in the next, like Lazarus. Because if you're like the rich man, then you will be happy in this life and suffer in the next. But if you suffer in this life like Lazarus, you can be happy in the next. And so for St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the ideas he brings out is that no, for us to be happy in the next, we have to first learn to be happy in this world. That the saints were the happiest people on this world. And that happiness that they started having in this world is the one that they now continue having in the next world. And of course, happiness is not necessarily material things. But the point is that we cannot neglect this world because of focus on Christ. So this has been a long introduction on the topic that I'm going to talk about, which is citizenship and social concern. You notice the concept of citizenship has to do with being a member of this earthly city with rights and responsibilities. You remember when St. Paul insists that as a Roman citizen, he has the right to appeal to Caesar when he's dissatisfied with the trial that is happening in Jerusalem. He insists he has a right to appeal to Caesar. One time he's whipped, a punishment that was not entitled, that Roman citizens were not meant to be inflicted, especially without a trial. And after he spent a night in prison, he tells the governor of that town, by the way, I'm a Roman citizen. He insisted on his rights as a citizen. So this idea of citizenship is the idea of saying that God has given us this world as our common home, and He has therefore given it to us for us to take care of it, to make it better, to perfect creation. And citizenship therefore is a question about our rights as people who have been given this common home with a certain human dignity, and also our responsibility to improve this common home for ourselves and for future generations. That is the concept of citizenship. In the Constitution of Kenya, citizenship occupies one of the chapters of the Constitution. Chapter 3 of the Constitution is on citizenship. It identifies who is a citizen, somebody who has either been born in Kenya, citizenship by birth, and whose parent is a Kenyan citizen. Even if you are not born in Kenya, if your parent is a Kenyan citizen, you are a citizen by birth of Kenya. Or somebody who takes up Kenyan citizenship by registration, either because of being married to a Kenyan citizen, or because of having lived in Kenya for more than 7 years, and then applying for citizenship. And citizens are given certain unique rights that non-citizens who may be living in Kenya don't have. Like the right to vote once you reach the age of 18 years, the right to be involved in determining what form of government should be governing us, what form of government to be involved in. That is how we were involved in the referendum, the new constitution. We can amend the constitution through popular referendum or popular approach, or we can be involved even if the constitution is being amended through the parliamentary approach, because the constitution ends up coming to us for referendum. We're involved in electing our leaders. These are some of the rights of our citizens. We can demand information from the government, the right of access to information. These rights are not shared with other people who are not citizens of Kenya. Only Kenyan citizens have these rights. But then, of course, even though we are citizens, we recognize that even non-citizens who live among us enjoy certain rights and responsibilities. That is why Chapter 4 of the Constitution of Kenya, which is on the Bill of Rights, does not start by saying every citizen has the right to life. What does it say? Every person in this country has the right to life. Every person has the right to human dignity. Every person should not be discriminated against. So there are certain rights, in fact the vast majority of rights in the Constitution are enjoyed by all human persons who happen to be in this country, not just the citizens. So there's a special class of rights that are only for citizens, like the right to determine the form of government, the leaders who are going to govern us, and then you have this other set of rights that are for all people that are found in this country. Interestingly, you even have some rights that apply to artificial persons, like a company. Company is not a human being, but is an association of people who come together. Company has a right to property. You can't take away the property of a company. In the same way, you can't take away the right of an individual person. But when you talk about the right to freedom of conscience, that one is a right for individual persons. Because a company doesn't have a conscience. You could say the conscience of the companies, the directors and the shareholders, but the company as a company doesn't have conscience, doesn't practice religion. Who practices religion? It is individual individuals. So that is the Constitution of Kenya. And this concept of rights, whether it is the rights of a citizen or the rights of a human being within a particular locality, is something which started developing more than 800 years ago, 900 years ago more or less, around the year 1250, when the nobles in England were very dissatisfied with the king, who was ruling like a tyrant. And they said, no, you must allow us certain rights. You can't be in charge of everything. And so they entered into a document, an agreement that is called the Magna Carta. Magna Carta, which is from Latin, means the Great Charter. It was the first major document in human rights history that established certain kinds of limitations to the power of the monarch. And human rights jurisprudence has developed from documents like the Magna Carta. In the 17th century, there were several documents in England. In the 18th century in France, during the French Revolution, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, the American Revolution that led to their War of Independence, they had a Bill of Rights in 1789. So these documents were the origins of what we now call modern Bill of Rights, where we recognize that every human being, by virtue of being human, has certain rights that the government cannot take away from them. And the only reason why these rights are set down in writing is not because it's the government which has given us these rights, is that we have to declare them so that the government doesn't get confused and take away our rights. This is the whole idea of rights under secular law. The rights are declared so that the government cannot take them away from us. During the Second World War, there was a major kind of like a tremor in the world in which for 4 or 5 years there was major bloodshed, a lot of atrocities, a lot of bad things were happening. You know, the genocide or the attempt to kill the Jews, 6 million Jews, they say, or estimate killed, the gypsies, a lot of shedding of blood in the wars that were fought during the Second World War, many atrocities, blanket bombing in the cities of England, like London, in Germany, like Dresden, in Japan. So there was a lot of atrocity. And when the war ended, in the year after the war ended, the nations of the world came together and they decided to set up this new organization to promote peace and security in the international community. And this organization is called the United Nations. And in the United Nations Charter, they recognize that every nation has a duty to promote peace and to respect the rights of its citizens. A few years later, this wife of the previous president of the United States, Roosevelt, the wife was called Eleanor Roosevelt, campaigned for a document that is called a Declaration of Rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This was at the international level, so that we were saying that as human beings from the different nations of the world, from different religions, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, all of us, we recognize that regardless of our religious tradition, by the mere fact that we are human beings, we enjoy certain human dignity, certain rights. And these rights were captured in this document of 1948 called the Universal Declaration of Rights, of Human Rights, like the right to life, the right to start a family, the right to have freedom of conscience, the right, freedom of assembly, freedom of movement within certain limits. So these rights were identified. And the whole idea was that if we don't identify these rights, these countries will again, governments will again get into wars, damage human rights, human dignity, torture, all these funny things that were happening during the wars, the European wars, the First and Second World War were largely European wars that spread to the rest of the world. We need to agree that we should not decide that you're an absolute tyrant or monarch, that you can decide anything for the people and even take away their rights. So this is the concept of human rights. And it was developing on the idea that those people that we had given the power of government over us had become absolute leaders, imperial presidents, or monarchs. They did not recognize the inherent human dignity of the individual person. And it is from there that you have developed other instruments of human rights, like in 1966, the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and then 1981, the African Charter of Human and People's Rights. Every continent came up with its own Charter of Rights, the Inter-American Covenant of Human Rights, the European Covenant of Human Rights. All of them exist because different nations of the world recognize that individuals have a certain human dignity. Many modern constitutions have a chapter on the Bill of Rights. Kenya's Constitution of 1963 had one, but when we came to 2010 and we wanted to come up with a more modern constitution, we expanded the Bill of Rights. We said that the rights that were in our original constitution were not enough. They were just a few, the traditional rights that we call first generation human rights. Right to life, freedom of assembly, freedom of movement, freedom against torture. You know, those were the first generation. But in 1966, when the nations of the world were negotiating these instruments of human rights, the African countries said that it's not enough to just talk about the right to life, that you should not imprison me without a proper trial. If you don't talk about economic, social, and cultural rights as well. Because if you tell me I have right to life, but you leave me starving, I will still die and die of hunger, even with that right to life that you've given me. So for me to enjoy my right to life, I need food, I need shelter, I need clothing, I need healthcare. So in the Constitution of Kenya of 2010, we borrowed from this second generation of rights that are found in the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Article 43 presents a responsibility to the government to work to establish policy measures, to work towards giving people the highest standard of healthcare, enabling everyone to have shelter, to have clothing, to have work, so that they can take care of themselves. This is the Constitution of Kenya. So you notice that under the Constitution of Kenya, rights are recognized. In fact, a broad amount of rights. The other thing that happened is that we've even recognized the third generation of rights, which is an issue that starts in the 1970s in Stockholm, when you have the international negotiation on the environment and the first treaties of the environment. Because there is this recognition that even if you take care of the civil and political rights, you take care of economic, social, and cultural rights. If you don't take care of third generation rights, which is the environment, ecological rights, intra-generational rights, you think about the rights of the next generation. You don't just finish everything so that the next generation come and they find deserts, they find there's no rainfall, they find the climate has changed. So this third generation of rights has also been recognized in our constitution. And then the interesting thing is that the initial approach to human rights used to be the vertical approach, where you would say that we as human citizens, as human beings, we enjoy rights. And who has the duty? We have rights. Who has the duty? Because if you have a right, someone else must have the duty. If I have the right to life, who has the duty to respect my life? Traditionally, under the vertical approach to human rights, the duty holder was the state. You remember I told you about the Magna Carta. Who had the duty? It was the king. When they established the French Revolution, who was being given the duty? The state. So the state was always the one given the duty. Everyone has rights, the state has duties. And so the problem is this. Is the state in existence in this church here as we are having this discussion? Is the state here? No. The state is not here. There is no police officer here, I ask you. There is no police officer providing security. Maybe they are outside, but inside here, they are not here. They are not here. Most of the time, as you go about your daily operations, the state is not there immediately next to you. Who is next to you? Your fellow citizen. So if it is only the state which has responsibilities, what happens? Your fellow citizen can attack you and finish you off. Your fellow citizen can violate your rights. And then what do? You have to rush to the police, you have to rush to hospital. And who is the one managing hospitals in Kenya? The government manages less than half of all medical facilities in Kenya. It's a church, it's a private people. So you realize the state cannot give you all your rights if it has to do it by itself. In fact, your neighbor is the one who is most impactful in your life more than the state. Is your neighbor. And you are most impactful in the life of the people around you. So the Constitution of Kenya of 2010 has not only recognized that vertical approach to human rights, it has now introduced the horizontal approach, where it says that every person must respect the rights of others. The logic is this: my rights end where someone else's rights begin. Because you see, the problem with the original understanding of human rights, the way it developed, you have this philosopher called John Stuart Mill. He wrote a book called On Liberty in 1867. He was British, he was a member of parliament in the British Parliament. And he said that the state should not interfere in the lives of individuals. Unless you are hurting someone else, just leave people free to do what they want. So the modern understanding of human rights has a very libertarian approach, very individualistic. People should leave me alone. If I want to commit suicide, why should other people care? If I want to take drugs, why should other people care? So this is the mentality of John Stuart Mill, and libertarianism about rights. Rights become almost absolute. If I want to get rid of this unborn baby in my womb, why should other people care? This is my body. You see, that is the logic of human rights now twisted by libertarianism. So rights become almost a threat. Everyone is just thinking about themselves. They are being selfish. The concept of right. Who has the responsibility? No, we have a right. Everyone is asserting rights. We always in the streets with placards only talking about our rights. No one protests about their responsibilities. So it was in this whole environment that in the year 1891, and this is an important year, in the year 1891, Pope Leo XIII published an encyclical. And encyclicals are very important and formal writings of the Pope. He published an encyclical called Rerum Novarum. Rerum Novarum. This is Latin. Rerum basically means things. Rerum is, if you translate rerum to English, it is things. And Novarum basically means new. Novo, new. So Rerum Novarum is an encyclical that is talking about these new things, these things that are coming up these days. And what are those things that Pope Leo XIII talks about? He talks about the condition of labor. This is in the Industrial Revolution. It's just happened. Workers are being underpaid. Capitalists are the ones controlling the world. You pay workers as little as you want because they are desperate. They don't know where to go and get better pay. So Pope Leo XIII starts talking about things like a just wage, a about the right of workers to form trade unions. He says it's not enough for us to think about ourselves as individuals. We need to manifest social concern. And that is we could call it the origin of the social doctrine of the church. We would say the modern or the contemporary social doctrine of the church. Because I've tried to demonstrate that the real genesis or origin of the social doctrine of the church is the Bible, is the good news, is the Gospels. But in the late 19th century, in 1891, that first papal encyclical of Pope Leo XIII became like an anchor event. It focused on these things that we are now discussing about being a good citizen, ensuring that everyone enjoys human dignity. You don't just do it because you want to. Adam Smith, who was an economist, he wrote more than 100 years earlier. He wrote this book where he was The Wealth of Nations, where he was talking about the market, the forces of supply and demand. He says that these forces of supply and demand of the market is an invisible hand that allocates resources. It determines the price. If you want to take a matatu from here to Nairobi, you get into the matatu. The town charges you certain amount of money. According to Adam Smith, it's the invisible hand that is deciding how much you should charge. It tells the capitalist how much to charge based on how much demand there is for the commodity, how much supply of the commodity. So for Adam Smith, the invisible hand had no morality at all. It was not immoral, it was just amoral. It was not a question of morality, it was a question of efficiency. So Pope Leo XIII comes and says, we can't just allow a moral hand of invisible hand to decide for us. You have people who don't earn a sufficient wage to pay rent for dignified accommodation. They are starving to death because they don't have food. This was a few years after the great potato famine, a few decades after the potato famine of Ireland. So what does Pope Leo XIII say? He says that as Christians, as Catholics, as human beings, we are called to manifest social concern. It's not enough to follow the amoral hand of the market. We must think about human dignity. So I'm now trying to capture the question of the social doctrine, and then I come to the last part of my presentation. After Pope Leo XIII writes Rerum Novarum, it becomes such a big hit in Christian circles that it generates a multiplicity of subsequent writings, encyclicals, and so on. 40 years later, you had another encyclical called Quadragesimo Anni. 40 years after Leo XIII wrote his encyclical, let us look again at the question of social concern. 60 years later, there was another one. In Vatican Council II, one of the major documents of the Second Vatican Council, the Pastoral Constitution of the Church in the World, is called in Latin Gaudium et Spes, is precisely on this. The church in the middle of the world. How should we operate? How should Christians operate in the middle of the world? Then you have subsequent encyclicals. And I'm okay, I'm fine. I don't need the water. But thank you for the social concern. This is social concern. So the point is, because of that one, you have more than 10, around 20 documents that have been written by the Universal Magisterium on the social concern that Christians should have as citizens of this earthly city. And Pope John Paul II even commissioned a kind of like compendium on the social doctrine of the church. It's available on the Vatican website, and you can look at it. And it establishes what are those themes that the church is concerned about. Fundamentally, there are so many principles established there. I want to just mention four key principles that underlie the social doctrine of the church. And from this we'll be able to identify what are our rights and responsibilities. One of the things we notice about the social doctrine of the church is the church comes to reflect on the existing situation. You remember Booklet 13, he said, these new things, what are those new things? The new situation we have found of urbanization, of industrialization, of people being paid wages, some of them being paid peanuts. This new situation, let us reflect on it. How should we operate here as a Christian? So the approach of the social doctrine of the church has always been to reflect on, to critique our human environment, to encourage us to take up the responsibility of this our common home, to make it a better place for ourselves and for the people around us. That is the idea of the social doctrine of the church. And there are four key principles there. Different writers and thinkers have mentioned others, but four key principles as far as I'm concerned from my analysis of the social doctrine. The first key idea that the church insists on is that in everything we do as Christians, let's not forget this idea that as human beings, we are imago Dei, we are image of God. We've been made in the image and likeness of God. We possess a great dignity. We have been made in the catechism to say that we are made to know, love, and serve God in this world and be happy beginning the next. But from the perspective of philosophy, we say human beings are creatures who are good in reference even to themselves. So we have a certain goodness that doesn't depend on what I can do, what I have done, what I'm able to do. By the mere fact that we have been made in the image of God. St. Augustine, you remember I told you about St. Augustine, Bishop of Hippo. He says, man is capax Dei, capable of God. And this is the reason why we have this human dignity. Each of us really has that potential of being a son or daughter of God. Each of us, wherever we are other Christs. So this idea of human dignity means that we have to be very respectful of life of human beings. Even the idea of the rights of other people, their right to have a dignified lifestyle, to have sufficient food, to have sufficient shelter, to be cared for when they are sick. All these things arise from that one principle, the idea of human dignity. And the social teaching of the church says, above everything else, when thinking about social concern, remember, those people around you have a value. They are worthwhile. I run a law firm. It's called Muma and Kanjama. And from time to time, I take up pupils. Pupils are young lawyers who are coming for training in the law firm, and we normally train them from here. And we always have an induction where different staff members go and talk to them. You are coming to this organization. Every year, when I receive new employees, pupils or other employees, one of the things I tell them is this, that you know, in the workplace, you may see as if there is a hierarchy. There is a boss, there is someone at the middle, there is someone maybe at the bottom. Maybe there is some job that you think I cannot do, only someone else can do. Maybe it's cleaning the toilets. I don't know, whatever it is that you think is below your dignity. And I always tell my staff that if there is a job that you think is below your dignity, you can't do it. Please don't ask someone else to do it. If you think it's below your dignity, you can't do it, then why should it be within the dignity of someone else? How do we stand like that?
So if you mess the toilet, please clean the toilet yourself. So that's just a practical illustration of this radical idea. And that idea of human dignity is the underpinning of the idea of equality of all men and women. We are equal. There are not some people who are superior to others. That's the first principle for the social doctrine of the church. And then because the social doctrine of the church was critiquing the political situation around, there were two main kind of like movements. One is a movement towards, we would call it totalitarianism, or control by big groups, government, communism, socialism, where you start saying that no, individual people, we can't trust them to do this thing on their own. Let us take over and do it. The government says, I can't trust parents. Let me be the one providing education. I can't trust private institutions, even the church. Let me be the one providing healthcare. I can't trust individuals. Let me do this. So the government takes over everything, and they do it very inefficiently. The second movement is the movement of radical capitalism, where you say the government should not be involved in anything. Let everyone sort themselves out. It's like the jungle. When the going gets tough, the tough gets going. If you're not able to get tough, too bad for you. You remain by the wayside. So everyone for themselves and God for us all. That is radical capitalism, individualism. So the church critiques these two. And you already find them in even the modern era. In America, you have the Republicans, who are more capitalists, the Democrats, who are more socialist. In the United Kingdom, you have the Labour Party, more social approach, the Conservative Party, more capitalist approach. So this is everywhere. Even in Kenya, you can find it if you look hard enough. So the church critiques both movements, and it introduces two principles. The first, against this idea of totalitarianism, that you have to come together to do everything, is the principle of subsidiarity. And the principle of subsidiarity is derived from human dignity. It basically says, what can be done by the individual should not be done or given as a responsibility to the group. What can be done by a smaller group should not be made a bigger responsibility of the bigger group. In other words, give people an element of autonomy to do their thing the way they want to do it. If people in this area of Kawasukari want to organize certain activities in church, you don't need to superintend them. Trust them to know what is good for them. That's the principle of subsidiarity. If you want to clean up your community, don't necessarily rush to the government to tell the government, come, saidia sisi, saidia hapa. What can you do by organizing yourselves in a small group? If you're in your family, how can you help your spouse, your children with what you have before you go and say saidia mimi? That's the principle of subsidiarity. Because totalitarian movements like communism, they take away the right to property. They take away the right to individual autonomy. They want everything to be done in a group, and therefore they harm human dignity. Our individualism is part of what gives us that dignity. And then you have the principle of solidarity, which is opposed to radical individualism. Some of the capitalists say, no, if I have worked hard and I've made a million shillings, I'm a multi-millionaire, why should I share with the poor? This is the product of my sweat. I built this company. Why should I share with others? If I have acquired large chunks of land, and there's some people who are landless, this was the situation in South America. You had a few people with large ranches, and most of the people had no land. Why should the others care? This is my land. It's my property. So the principle of solidarity is now the one where the church says, no, all of us have a duty to care for others and a duty to care for the environment. That is why it is good to pay taxes, because those taxes should be used to help other people. And if you find the taxes are being misused, don't ignore it. Mobilize. so that you can push that agenda for the taxes to be used to improve the conditions of the society, of your neighborhood. One of the developments that has come up in the modern days is something that is called NIMBY. In environmental law, NIMBY is an acronym. When somebody, for example, you have this neighborhood of Hawasukai, and maybe you need to establish a dump site. Because every neighborhood, there is garbage that is generated. All kinds of garbage. There is human waste, there is other kind of waste. No one ever wants to have a dump site in their neighborhood. So the word NIMBY means not in my backyard. No one wants to have things that are not working well in their backyard. You paint your house, you want your place to be clean. You don't care so much about the next neighborhood. And that's why you find on some of the nice, beautiful. Based on the economic situation, they know about standards of cleanliness. But when they're on the road, when they are not in their own neighborhood, they don't care. They throw rubbish anywhere and everywhere. Not in my backyard, but if it's not my backyard, I don't care. So the church says, no, principle of solidarity. We must care. And that is part of the rights and responsibilities of the citizens. And then the fourth principle for the church, which has been brought up very well, Francis and Benedict, is this principle of charity and mercy. That what motivates us is that we want to help others. Because sometimes we go, oh, justice. I've already paid my taxes. So why should I be concerned that I've paid my taxes? Why should I help a beggar on the streets and I've paid my taxes? Why should I do this? So it's that approach of saying strict justice. But we know justice is not enough to deal with the problems we have in this world. Hence, the need for this idea of justice or mercy. Because justice without mercy is harsh. It always leaves victims, bodies in the wake of this kind of justice. If you have to punish other people strictly according to justice, none of us will survive. All of us will be in jail because you committed a criminal offense at some point in time. You may not even have known it was a criminal offense. We have a multiplicity of laws, and there are all kinds of criminal offenses. If you are a motorist, for sure you have at one point of time or another gone above the speed limit or taken a wrong turn at a particular point in time. Or maybe you may not disclose all your income and pay full taxes. You know, these are all criminal offenses. You did not know now you and the law actually has a provision where you can be fined or imprisoned. So if strict justice was to be applied, none of us would survive even in this world, leave alone the next one. I have a friend who, when I was a student, he always used to ask us the question. When exams were coming close, he would ask us, so my name is Kanjama, should I pray for justice or for mercy? When I'm going to do an exam, and I will always tell you, pray for mercy. Because if you pray for justice, you're basically praying that God may enable me to be rewarded for the work I have done. And I'm not sure I have studied enough to get the best grade. So please pray for mercy. I will always tell this friend. And this is what charity is about. That if you have to insist on justice, strict justice with other people, and they insisted on it with you, it would be terrible. One of the famous plays of Shakespeare is called Merchant of Venice. It's a fantastic play. And in Merchant of Venice, there is this guy called Antonio. He's a merchant. He's quite rich actually. He's a merchant, and one of the things he does is, in those days, this was 15th century, they would enter into maritime adventures. So they would take a lot of capital, they would load on a ship, and the ship, because he didn't like the way Antonio used to do business. Antonio sometimes would forgive his customers or the people he was treating when they were not able to pay. And Shylock did not like it. He said, Antonio is damaging business here. So he took advantage of this opportunity of Antonio asking for a loan to tell him, I'll give you a loan, but on one condition. If you fail to pay me, I'm going to take a pound of flesh from you. That's the only condition I give you. Antonio was desperate. He thought that he'd get the money back. So he signed the contract. And the contract provided, in the event of breach, then Shylock is entitled to a pound of flesh. And sure enough, he got the money, to a large sum of money, invested in his business. But unfortunately, the ship sank. There were some major waves, and the ship sank. And Antonio was not able to pay Shylock. So Shylock told Antonio, you have not been able to pay. The contract is clear. You give me a pound of flesh. And so the case went to court. And the judge had to apply justice. Strict justice. Shylock told him, apply strict justice. There is a contract here. I've signed with Antonio. And according to this contract, he's meant to give me a pound of flesh. So they plead with Shylock, can you accept something else? He says, no. I want my pound of flesh. So Antonio is told, you'll have to give a pound of flesh. And Antonio pleads with Shylock. He tells Shylock, you're going to take a pound of flesh, you're going to kill me. Shylock says, no. It says a pound of flesh from my place of choosing. And I'm choosing a pound of flesh closest to the heart. This is what Shylock said in the trial. So after listening to all that, the judge pleads with Shylock for mercy. And it's a famous passage in Merchant of Venice where the judge is a lady called Portia. She tells Shylock, the quality of mercy is not straight. It befits kings better than their crown. It's beautiful. It is something that is the very quality of God himself. Be merciful. He pleads with Shylock. Shylock says, I've listened to you. I want my promise. So the judge then writes the judgment. And in the judgment, he says that because you apply strict justice according to the laws of Venice, this is my judgment. Shylock is entitled to a pound of flesh, because that's the contract. But he shall not take an ounce more or an ounce less. He shall not take a drop of blood in addition to that pound of flesh. And if he sheds a drop of Christian blood, his life shall be forfeit, because he will have committed murder. And at that point, Shylock realizes he's messed up. He no longer can get his pound of flesh, because he insisted on strict justice. So strict justice, yes, you get your pound of flesh, but it was a pound, not an ounce more. An ounce is like a gram, not a gram more or a gram less. So when you are cutting with the knife, ensure you get just 1 pound. And because you ask for a pound, don't shed any blood, because it was a pound of flesh, not flesh and blood. What's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is that if we insist on strict justice, none of us will survive. That is why the church says charity and mercy. Those are the 4 principles. So I'm now coming to the end of the presentation. We are approaching the 2022 elections. We have talked about rights and responsibilities of a citizen. From the Constitution of Kenya, from secular law, we've talked about rights and responsibilities from the social doctrine of the church, focusing on the common good, on the interest of others. You realize, even without me making the conclusion, you can already start making the conclusion for yourself. How should we act? How should we behave in the run-up to 2020? How should we behave? What are my duties and responsibilities? The Constitution of Kenya says every Kenyan citizen above the age of 18 has the right to vote. The church tells us, as a citizen, you also have the responsibility to vote. How should we behave? Is it only a question of voting on that day in August 2022? What about the run-up to the elections? How should we speak about the people who are around us? It is quite unfortunate that Kenya, which is a country that is 85% Christian and 10% Muslim, they are also people of religion. 95% religious, they are Hindus and so-called Muslims, is a country which is suffering from such severe social ills. Top among them being corruption and negative ethnicity, which we call tribalism. Who are the people who engage in hate speech? Is it non-Christians or Christians? You might say it's Christians. I will tell you, those people who speak about other tribes or communities like this and that, they are within us in our churches. They are among us. They are in our families. They are in our schools. They are in our markets. They are in our workplaces. It's even me and you who do it. We are the ones who have fallen short of the will of God. It's us. We do it. And of course we know the 10 commandments, one of the commandments is thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor. We are the ones who whisper. Sometimes you whisper to others that, you know, I don't like my son or daughter cannot marry from this other tribe. Or I don't know if this or this happens to me. Other people, yes, but not my son or daughter. So sometimes we notice that in public we may be manifesting a certain kind of like standard of behavior. But when we are there, we're the ones on social media attacking this, attacking the other person. The text says that if you are involved in social situation, of course you have to engage in dialogue and discussion. And yes, you have to point out a problem which people want to be leaders. It doesn't mean you don't speak about the faults of others, but don't lie. And even when you're speaking about the faults of others, you do so when it is necessary to do so. You don't do it when it's not necessary to do so. So when we talk about our own behavior in the run-up to 2022 elections, then the question arises, what are the challenges we are facing as a country? One, socio-economic challenges. Is it only our leaders who are meant to resolve those socio-economic problems for the good of others, where you don't charge, but you do it to help other people? And we can ask ourselves, what is my pro bono job? What do I do to help my society and my community? Which organization am I in? What initiative am I involved in? What activity can I do in the run-up to 2022? So I'm not talking about political, I'm talking about socio-economic, to take care of the needs of the people around me. That is the first thing. And then now we have the political space. How am I expected to behave as a citizen as we run up to 2022? Some people decide that politics is dirty and not take part in politics. Some others say that all these candidates are crooks, I'm not going to vote. So the church will tell you, vote for the one who's less of a crook, if all of them are crooks. But the question is, does political concern remain at the level of voting? I can remain completely disconnected from politics so long as on that day of voting I go and I vote? Or should I also participate in political processes? Sometimes by the time you've reached the general election, the candidates on the ballot box have already been determined in the party primaries, political party primaries. And many of the middle class Kenyans, Nairobians, they don't take part in political party primaries. They are beginners, you know. leave that for the people, I don't know which area, to do it. Fine, so I'll wind up in the next 3 minutes. This is part of social concern. So the point is that the political process is not just the day of voting. It is those other things that enable us to have the right candidates also standing for election. One of my former classmates from high school has decided to run for a position of MCA and member of county assembly in one of the constituencies or wards in the home, in fact in the nation. And so my classmates are quite excited, and one day we went for a meeting with him and we were giving him advice about what to do. And one of the things that he needs is he needs financial support. He needs other kinds of resources. So if my level of political concern is to say I will vote on the day of elections, but I'll not do anything else before then of course you will not get the right candidates there. Or you will not have assisted to clean up or sanitize the political environment when others are engaged in hate speech. You will not have given your contributions or comments. That means we will have failed as citizens. So I think there's so much to be done that for me, I want to conclude by making a challenge to each of us. And the challenge is simply this, that we have listened keenly, I've seen all of you listen, to this idea of social concern and citizenship. It is not for anyone else to tell you what initiative or activity to be involved in. But if each of us can have a resolution of what concrete and specific thing I can do in those dimensions of political engagement, you don't need to become a politician, but politics will be around us. You can engage other people even in conversation. In the area of socio-economic concern, in the area of charity and mercy, if each of us can look for a concrete thing to do in those areas, even if it is just scanning the environment around your community to see what is going on. If this place is too dirty, how can we improve the standard of cleanliness? If the youth don't have anything to do during holidays, how can I organize an activity to keep them busy during school holidays? If they are not coming to church, how can I do something to help them come to church? If I can find a specific initiative, then for sure I will have done what the church expects of me, what the state expects of me, what society expects of me, what the people around me expect of me. So let me start with that specific activity. And this really is what will enable us to promote the human dignity of ourselves and of others as well. Because what we learn when we become involved in matters of social concern is that the person who benefits most by being generous with their things, with their time, with their money, is the person who is being generous. The generous person benefits more than anyone else. Psychological studies have been done, sociological studies, and they've all shown that happiness comes when you are concerned about other people and less about yourself. Thank you very much.
And we have learned so much. He's really been able to put things nicely, given as a context, the evolutionary issue of human rights. And I believe also for the CJPC members also, he's broadened our minds about what we can actually be able to do as individuals, or even as the CJPC itself. That was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. Another round of applause for him. Next time he says he's coming here, I bet it will be double or 3 times what we had this afternoon. So thank you once again. Next is Daisy, who will take us through the next session. Most welcome.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. And thank you so much once again, Father Pedro, CJPC, and all of you for this opportunity. It is a great pleasure to be here with you. It's not easy to speak after Charles. Like you, I agree. It is always a pleasure to listen to Charles. He teaches, every time he speaks, we learn so much. I think he's one of those Kenyans who are truly active citizens. He takes an interest in everything. And so I want to appreciate you, Charles. I mean, in your own capacity, as the citizen, lawyer, and everything, because Charles does, when he sees things going on, even if he's going to be a lone voice, he must speak. And I think it's a challenge to all of us, you know. Perhaps we are maturing in our democracy because we've been conditioned to believe that, you know, things are done by others. It's always somebody else's problem. It's never my problem, you know. And the more active citizens we have, the more we realize that it is actually our problem. The way our state, our cities, our wards, our constituencies are governed is our problem, because it will affect you one way or another, down to your household, at the individual level, and I think all of you are beginning to see it. So mine is really to speak about democracy and my responsibility, and I want to do that within the framework of the Dialogue Reference Group and the process so far. Because the church has been instrumental, especially the Catholic Church. You know that the DRP is chaired by Bishop Hoover. He's the chair. And so I want to speak within that context so that we're able to understand that the church has not been aloof, you know, and we have a responsibility, all of us, to participate. But it's not just the church, but also citizens, because I'm also a member of CJPC, even though, I mean not CJPC, DRG, even though Simon would love me to be a member of CJPC. Maybe he'll convert me, that's his mission. But I want to speak about that. And first, before that, I really want us to just go, to look at really just Kenya as a country, because we need to appreciate the opportunities that we are given. We know that every 5 years, as citizens, we are given an opportunity to make a decision about how we are governed. The Constitution is very clear in Article 4, the Declaration of a Republic. Kenya is a republic. And a republic is a form of government where the people exercise their right to choose the people who will represent them in the different levels of government. That the different arms of government that we have, you know, executive, legislature, and the judiciary. So, in essence, it is not government through heritage. It's not something that is inherited. It's not a monarchy. We're not a monarchy. We're a republic. Now, the thing is, one of the biggest challenges, and I'll say this now on my personal behalf, is that we don't take our responsibilities seriously in terms of how we exercise this phenomenal opportunity that we are given every 5 years to actually decide who will govern us, who will administer the state on our behalf. Part of the work that I do is with women. I'm a women's rights advocate, And so we are always pushing for more women to be included in governance and non-discrimination of women and everything. But I say that it is important for us to understand that the administration of the state comes to your house. Politics is everybody's business. You can't say it's a dirty game, so we're not going to be there. Waiting for somebody to decide for us who we're going to pay. And I like what Charles said, because this is one of the arguments that I've always made, particularly to the middle class. How many of you, by the way, are members of political parties? I'm not trying to drum up support, I'm just curious. How many of you are actually card-carrying members of a political party? Show of hands. One. Okay, how many of you are registered voters? So all of you are registered voters. Meaning, at some point, you plan to go and vote. It's in your And of course, you want to be able, by the time you get to the ballot, you want to see candidates who you believe are qualified enough to administer the state on your behalf. It's in the resources and make decisions for you. Yet, the premier gateway to leadership and decision making in Kenya is the political party. Premier gateway. And that premier gateway ensures that people arrive on the ballot via the nomination process, or what we call party primaries. Party primaries are conducted by political parties. So if, for instance, you say, I want to vote for Daisy, one of the things that you must make sure is that Daisy is on the ballot, isn't it? How do you make sure that Daisy is on the ballot? You make sure you involve yourself in the party primaries that will ensure that Daisy gets to the ballot. Most of us engage with the electoral process at the end of the process. Where we enter the booth, and you don't even know who these people are. I don't know who is this. Now, what kind of candidates are these? So now you're making a pick based on what others chose for you. That is part of the responsibility that we have today. The other thing is, we allow people to decide for us. Right now, we have a host of people actually organizing. We have consensus democracy playing out before our very eyes. Yeah? Whereby there are people who are negotiating, and just like the way, I'm not a football fan, but I see on social media Man U fans, Arsenal fans, I don't know who is who, but there's people who are so invested in these teams, yet nobody, not even the coaches of these teams, has any idea who you are, and whether that team wins or loses, it adds nothing to you. This is how we engage with politics in this country. This is how we engage with leadership. We sit, we are spectators, you want to see why the newspaper, you want to see, so who is emerging, who's going to be named the flag bearer. So you then engage with what has been decided for you. This is not what a republic is. We are not taking advantage of the opportunity that we are given every 5 years, because for the next 5 years, we're going to have to live with whatever decisions are made. Those guys who arrive at the ballot and how we choose them. So this is something that we need to know. The other thing is that we're a multi-party democracy, meaning that we have many parties. We have many parties. Party A, Party B, Buzi, Kondo Party, there are many parties. Okay? So not just the dominant parties that we see. And we are founded on national principles of governance. So it's important to understand that you have a role, that the Constitution has actually given you a role to actively make those decisions, not other people making those decisions for you. Because at the end of the day, the way we engage with this democracy is that we simply go to endorse the decisions that have been made for us. This is really how we do it. We are given now these people on the ballot, then we spend the next 5 years, and this is classic Kenya. Immediately after elections, people start lamenting, well, now see, and it's usually just the same lot, that we keep engaging with. So it's important that we understand that we actually have a very important role. Very, very important role. I don't know how many of you would recruit your house help and then just leave them to do whatever they wanted, anyhow they wanted, and you're not engaging with them. None of us do this, yet we do this with our big household. So, the DRG, I want to talk about the issues that we're grappling with, or that have been identified, key issues that have been identified within the dialogue reference process, the framework, how we have engaged with them, what is being said, what we are looking forward to, so that we may decide really how we're going. Because this is not just about you, it's about future children, it's about future generations. Okay? This Kenya, if Kenya goes back, it goes back to all of us. You know, we will not be spectators if our country falls apart. So we are invested, whether we like it or not, and so we need to become active in it. So the Dialogue Reference Group is a key organ of faith-based institution, faith and non-state actors. It was set up in 2016, right? The key issues of it was to enable Kenyans to dialogue on key issues of strategic importance. Among them, securing stability and peace, advancing democratic governance and accountability, economic well-being of the nation, and address matters of social services and well-being and morality. Just the things that Charles was talking about here, about the human rights and social responsibilities and all that. It is convened by religious leaders, but its members include youth, women groups, labor organizations, business communities, professional associations, and many others. So there are many different players, but what it aims to do is to bring a wide cross-section. Okay, and it is chaired by Catholic Bishop Kivuba. The 7 issues that were identified within this framework include electoral justice and management, how our elections are carried out. And we know that's a big thing because many a time we've seen that the problems that we have experienced as a nation include what? Election mismanagement, which ends up causing a lot of conflict in the country. National reconciliation, healing, and cohesion. Some of those things that we've talked about, negative ethnicity, people rising up against each other, corruption, major issue. Security sector reforms, strengthening of devolution, economy and service delivery, constitutional, legal, and institutional reforms. So those are some of the issues that were raised. So one by one, what are the concerns that were raised? So on the electoral justice and management agenda, one of the things with elections just coming up, because there have been, we've had a national dialogue conference, NDC, one. We've had county consultations, and I believe we've had county consultations here. So there have been issues that have been identified at the national level and then respective county levels. But there are general issues that have been So the electoral justice and management agenda was looking at how our elections are being managed. With elections now 9 months away, at that time we were looking, I think it was about 13 months away. However, we know that the issues that necessitated the famous handshake You know that the handshake was driven by electoral justice issues, right? And so, none of those things have been addressed. Many of the issues that were laid out as electoral management issues have not been addressed. They've not been addressed. And so that is problematic. It was believed that with the handshake, that those 9 issues that were listed as the Building Bridges initiative, that those are the issues that would be addressed. But instead, what emerged was now what was called the BBI process that became now a host of constitutional amendments that then ended up dividing people more than it brought people together. So we were not building bridges anymore. We had some poking holes. We had others investors that I don't want to go into because I think you know that some of us were openly against the overinvestment in the BBI process. We do know that IBC, as things stand right now, has very little time to settle and prepare. We have the new commissioners that are in now. But we've seen IBC remains under-resourced. We see they have been denied resourcing and the partnerships that they rely on to deliver on their mandate in delivering credible electoral process. Many donors have been told funding should not go to them. There's also now what we're seeing within the political landscape, threats of the removal of the chair. They are now called for the chair. This is almost a ritualistic thing. Every election, the electoral management body must change. So that builds into the instability. The CEO, remember it's 9 months to the election. CEO, we do not have a substantive CEO. The CEO is still in an acting capacity. There's uncertainty. There's quite a lot of uncertainty in terms of the electoral management body's ability to actually carry out the elections. And we know that litigation has stopped some parts of procurement. So there's still a lot that is in abeyance right now. Voter registration has also proved to be quite something. We saw that IBC was planning to register at least 1.5 million voters. Was it 1.5 million? 6 million within this short time, and they were only able to register 1 point something, 1.5 million. Yes, it was the 1.5 million. That is reminiscent of some kind of voter apathy. And we've actually tried to engage young people because they were targeting mainly new voters. And many of them are not excited about the electoral process. They're like, honestly, if we are being lined up to, vote for these guys, there's nothing in it for us. That apathy doesn't bode well for our democracy because it means that Kenyans are losing interest in the elections. And there's even an initiative that is being pushed that is being called Operation No Elections because people are saying elections are meaningless in this country. We just line up, our votes don't count, our decisions don't count, so why vote? So there is a need to fully evaluate the state of preparedness for elections. Then, within National Reconciliation and Healing, the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, in their roadmap to peaceful election, they listed 6 threats to peaceful elections. One is the lack of trust. There's a serious trust deficit. A subculture of violence. We know that in Kenya it's problematic. We've learned to resolve our issues violently. We resolve things through violence. Divisive and selfish politics. Ethnic polarization. Untimely and inadequate response to conflicts. And structural inequalities. So within the framework of the lack of trust, there is a lack of trust between the state and the people, between communities, and we are seeing this. And yet, that trust is critical to having faith in the electoral process. So if there's already a lack of trust, and we've already seen, statements that don't, we may laugh about it, but these things are really dangerous, by the way. They are not, that violence. So when you come, I come here and I want to sell my welfare to Simon's turf. And so Simon organizes homes to come in for problematic, okay? Citizens are manipulated to engage and participate in violence. And I will tell you that this is something that we have witnessed, that even young people have met with us. We had an engagement with some young people where we were talking to them about things that they absolutely can't do. There are certain things you can't do, but there are things that you can do and you can agree. For instance, you can agree, I will not be used to go and cause chaos. I will not be used to go and incite violence. But one of them said, you know, Madam Daisy, you come here to tell us this. But here I am, I'm a young guy, I have no work, I have a family to feed, I don't know how I'm going to feed them. You can be sure, if a politician comes and gives me some money today and tells me to go and Furuga this place, or even to burn, I will do it. And this was straight up, they wanted to do. So, in violence, the people are, violence is a strategy, unfortunately, in our political scope, it is a strategy. How do I make sure that you can't participate in the nomination process? I come with my rules to make sure that your people don't participate. And we've seen it happening. We've seen it play out in my elections. We have seen it already even in the campaign trails where guys are stoned, whether it is self-stoning or stoning to, you know, that's another story, but still, it's a narrative. So that subculture of violence, unfortunately, has become almost acceptable. But this is true, and we may laugh about it, but you know that we must laugh at our problems then. If we're going to laugh about these decisions that we make, then we must laugh about our problems, because we are visiting those problems upon ourselves. In your opening statement, you talked about people getting the leaders they deserve. Honestly, you can't elect leaders like that and expect that it's going to be hunky-dory. This is, it has to be deliberate. So the religious sector, and you see when we talk about the religious sector, one of the things that I love about the Catholic Church is they are very well organized, you know, and are able to reach down to the village level, you know. And so the religious sector has a very big role to play in this, all of us, because we are all part of the problem. And I think it was a chance we mentioned that some of us are part of, you know, that thinking where we perpetuate certain stereotypes, you know. My child cannot marry into that trend. It's okay if anybody else's does, but mine can't, you know. And we do it, and we know we do it, you know. We are part of that problem, so we are part of that solution also. Corruption. We don't know what more we can say about corruption, and even the DRG felt the country has totally lost the steam. And there was a very elaborate framework. Number one was repeal Article 99(3) of the Constitution that allows people who've been accused of corruption to vie for political seat and be elected when, you know, for as long as their matter has not been concluded. And we know that they play around with the justice system. If you steal enough, you can corrupt or hamper the process. Put enough sand in the wheels of the process so that the system doesn't get you, and you will find. Many people know that. So after I have stolen, what do? I must seek public office. Why? Because it becomes a shield for me to defend myself, not so? So that is one of the things the DRG was clear about. Where has the church been? How come nobody's appalled? The president was on national radio. He talked about 2 billion shillings being stolen. Or is it that maybe I think that we have become so immune to the figures, you know? Or maybe we can't conceptualize what 2 billion shillings is. But I remember we were somewhere with Mother where we were being explained to what 1 billion shillings is. That if you are given 1 billion shillings, and you're told to spend 100,000 shillings every day, it will take you 32 years to spend 1 billion. Okay? And I think that that's also part of the problem, because the amounts are so mind-boggling. Do you recall that there was a lady who featured in the news? She had gone to sell her child for 50,000 shillings. And she actually felt that 50,000 shillings would address her woes. She had other children and she just couldn't feed this child. So she said, if I can sell this child for 50,000 shillings, I'll be able to address my problems and look after the ones that I have. 50,000 shillings. You know that 50,000 shillings is not going to take her very far. Okay? Yet, our president, without batting an eyelid, spoke of 2 billion that is stolen daily of taxpayers' money. You know, maybe you don't think it's your money. Sometimes I wonder whether we actually understand that government money is our money. There's no way a government goes to work to make money. It makes money from you. That's why KRA are now coming into your social media to see how you guys are living the soft life. Because they want money. So it's your money. So it's 2 billion shillings of your money that is being stolen. Did you hear any uproar? I didn't. We become careless. The DPP losing or withdrawing cases, in some cases even being accused of doing a shoddy job deliberately so cases may fail. And then the judiciary is accused, yet the judiciary can only judge based on the evidence that is provided. A seeming lack of coordination between the arms of the criminal justice system, the investigative and the prosecutorial arms. So there's a lack of coordination. So it's almost like it is deliberate. How will that be addressed? Security sector reforms, we know during COVID it was horrible. The high-handed implementation of COVID protocols, the police meeting out, including killing Kenyans because of not wearing masks. Now, we've already seen the punctuation of conflict where the police are responding with high-handedness and even being involved in some of those conflicts. The Inspector General of Police under the new constitution is supposed to be an independent office. No more orders from above. Yet we see them operating with orders from above. The PS for Interior can actually stand and say, we're going to do politics. We will do. They're not supposed to. Under the current constitutional framework, there is that separation. Nobody is saying anything. So these are real issues. On a positive note, though, agencies are doing a lot to avert terrorist attacks in the country, prevent some violent crime. We're seeing it further. You know, there's the alerts, there's the police here, you know. So there is some. They're not all that. But by and large, I think the security sector is overwhelmed. And higher-ups seem to be operating on instructions so that they are operating almost on a partisan manner. We've also seen abuse of security agents. So there's also the issue about gangs and militia. There are parts of this country now, you pay protection fee, okay? Because there's no security. So for you to have security, for you to be able to walk freely here, it's the guys who are providing that security. If you don't pay the protection fee, they are the same people who will rob you, you know? It's happening in the transport sector and all. How are we going to deal with this? These are the issues of concern. Devolution is also taking a hit. We know pending bills, big issue. And those pending bills are problematic to the extent that these are people that need to be paid. Businesses are closing down because of pending bills. You know, the counties are not able to pay. I don't know if counties finally got their money. Did they get their money from the last financial year? So we have a problem, and there seems to be a tendency towards re-centralization because the national government continues to eat up functions and roles of the devolved units. Okay, nobody seems to be protecting devolution. There's a lot of duplication of roles between the national and county governments that's eating up into a lot of much needed resources. Okay, so there needs to be clear policy and legislative reforms that ought to be embraced fast. We need to agree on what needs to be done so that they are implemented immediately after the 2023 elections. They are implemented. Otherwise, we will lose devolution. We will lose devolution. On issues of the economy, the state of the nation is not in a good place. We know that heavy taxation right now, as the state is grappling with the debt problem, is trying to find resources. You know, our debt is actually quite high. We don't have enough. We're not generating enough productivity, and so there's less and less money. Even though now I think with the opening up of the economy and things coming back to normal, things are improving. But we know there are some businesses that will never recover. We We've already seen in the media issues of billions being transacted through Visa. These are borrowings. The decision by the state, forcing the delisting of defaulters. That is problematic. Why? Because we're also creating a culture of people not being responsible for their debt. So what do you say? What are the implications on that? By the way, a lot of people are celebrating, especially those that were listed on CRB, they're celebrating, but guess what? The negative effects of that is that banks are going to begin to make decisions. Banks are going to look at, they're going to price their loans and their products much higher. They can decide not to lend to you. Remember that banks are making a lot of money still lending to government, so it's not in their interest to lend to you. So what happens? Less and less money is available for the ordinary citizens. So it will actually have, it will kill the lending environment, and it will have a negative consequence in the long run. That's not a good place to be. Already we have high unemployment. Still the trauma of COVID and the economic situation is not good. That becomes a very easy trigger for violence. There are other ways that can be recommended to deal with defaulters, because one of the things CRB were doing is even if you pay your loan, you remain listed, So how do you go about it? These are things that people must step into. So we know that the issue of constitutional and legal amendments, that ship has sailed. We can't have any constitutional amendments now. There were recommendations that were made, but we can't have them. Yet, there's still some that are going on. If you know what's going on in Parliament, a lot of what it will benefit the ordinary citizen has been thrown out, but what will benefit the politician, like members of Parliament going into the executive, having the Prime Minister and everything, they're still issuing these things through Parliament, even though they will need referenda for them, but they're still doing it. We don't know what the end game of that is, okay? So, when we talk about now our role, your role, our role, we have a responsibility to consolidate the issues. Right now, I'm not hearing anybody talking about real issues, other than making promises of, we'll give you 6,000 shillings to the young people. I don't know if it's per month or it's just going to be a one-off. There's bottom up. People are being given wheelbarrows. They're being told that, we're going to give you money. But the truth of the matter, those issues that we've listed, these are the real issues. Nobody's talking about them. So we must make a demand on those that are laying a claim to leadership to address them. And those are things that can be done through organizing. The same way that you have invited us, you can organize in your chamas, CJPC, bring the people who are saying, we want to be your board representatives. How are you going to address those issues? Come, tell us what your agenda is. It is time for us to begin to make a demand of those laying a claim on leadership, to tell us not to vote on the basis of tribe. We must break away from this. One of the things that I like about the Christian brotherhood is brethren, sistren. It's called the brotherhood. But we are all one in Christ, not so? So that we are not a tribe, we are not male, we are not female, but we are one. Senor. So this issue of tribe, we must break away from this. The only thing that I need to be is your tribe. If you're going to make your choice on the basis of tribe, guess what? That's the only thing I need to be. I don't need to be a person of integrity. I don't need to be able to administer the state or lead with skill and integrity. I just need to be your tribesperson. That's all I need to be. So you can't complain. If your choice is based on tribe, then you must put up with it. You've got your tribe, everything else comes along with that tribesperson. If they are a thief, then you must accept your tribesperson is a thief. We've heard them saying, that's how this is our thief, we'll deal with them. But it is no longer tenable. And I will tell you that really as a country, we are not in a good place. We're not in a good place economically. We're not in a good place socially. However, it is not doomsday. It's not too late. We can make a change. We can organize. We've got a whole 9 months. In politics, one day is like 1,000 years, We can organize ourselves, agree on what is it that we want. And we know, we've said we want leaders of integrity. We want leaders who will address these issues. And with a plan, not say, you elect me and I'll give you my plan. Give us your plan and tell us what your plan is. And these are things that you can do, right? Organize the people to identify their needs. You may not know all the needs, but you can identify them and prioritize them and say, these are the issues that we want to see addressed. Those are the things that we do. But we can all do that. The other thing that you can do is you can refuse to engage violently. You can encourage others, work with young people, talk to them. Because if there is something that we can all agree on is that we can go and vote and go home and wait for the outcome. We don't need to take panga, we need to wait for the authorities to do the right thing. When you see things going wrong, we should all be like a kanjama. If it is a matter that needs to go to court because IBC has not put frameworks in place, the IBC, if you go to IBC's website, they have what they call Elections Operation Plan. And it is a clear timeline of things that need to happen at a certain time, okay? For as long as those things are not happening, we know there will not be a free, fair, and credible election. Even if you will not go to court, you can call Kanjama. Kanjama will go to court and he will ensure that the whistle is blown on those things. There are so many things that we can do. And so we cannot sit around wringing our hands hoping for the best. You know, A.W. Tozer is a writer, and he said that we do not honor God when he has given us a watch by asking him what the time is. So he's given you a watch so that you can look at the time for yourself. You don't need to pray and find out what the time is. We have opportunity. Democracy has given us an opportunity to be able to engage with processes. We must be active citizens, and part of being active citizens, you see the way you have come here, you could have been at home sleeping, you could have been out with your people, but you've come, you've sat down and listened. We can do that in our little spaces, we can do that. We can organize ourselves, we can begin to identify people, even from among us. Are you telling me here that we don't have people who we can actually elect? People who we can hold to account? That if we elect you and we hold you to account and we make sure that you are doing the right thing, we don't have people we know. We are still waiting out there for the people for us to be told so and so. We have people among us who are leaders, people we know, people we call upon to do things for us. Why can't we mobilize and begin to push people into leadership? I don't know if Charles wants to be a leader. I know he has vied for LSK, but we can ask Charles to be a member of parliament. You know, and then we make sure we mobilize around him. But that is what is done. What do you think? All the things that we see playing out right now in the newspaper is what? Is people who decided so and so can be a leader. So now let's talk to everybody else. Let's support this one. Okay, you will become something. You know, that's what they're doing. We can also organize like that. Why do we feel that we can't organize? We've said politics is dirty. We've left it to the filthy to play with it. Why can't we clean it up by beginning to feed the pipeline with leaders of integrity, looking for people who we can actually position for leadership? We don't even need to put them everywhere. We can agree, even if it's half of the country, half of the wards, we look for people. The network, the Christian network is huge. Within your different wards, look who do you know who is a leader who we can send? Is that not how it was done before, even within our cultural settings? If you wanted to send somebody, you sat together and say, who is the one who knows how to read? Who is faithful? Who will send? They will not go getting distracted. At the end of the letter, we do share. See, we used to do that. See, that's what used to be done. We do that. As in, it's ours to do for this. Really, that's the bottom line. Whether we like it or not, the outcome of 2022 will be decided by us. We were having a conversation with Charles before coming up here, and he said something to me, and I thought about it when I was sitting there, about everybody having their own agenda, but it's still about probability. You know, how you play your game. And it's almost a game of chance. But your chances increase the more you engage, So, that's a decision that we can actually make. It's a decision that we can make, and it's a decision we must make. something changes. And we must change our mode of engagement. We absolutely must. And as we do that, let's also look at women. And women are faithful. When we want treasurers, teachers, nurses, people we can trust, who do we always look to?
Men.
No, actually it is women. So we have a mix. I'm not saying all women, but we must have our women in there. You know, let's look for women, let's look for men, let's look for young people. But the thing is, you have a role. You have a role. So don't say kimeumana, kitaumana as long as you don't play your role. So I'm expecting to see a change. I'm taking an active role. I'm mobilizing. We're looking for women. If you know women who are interested in buying, send them our way. We work with women. No offense to you men. I'm sure there are many people who are working with men. We are simply working with women. We are also going to be looking for men to support those women. But if you know of good women who can be good leaders that are interested in buying, please send them our way. Let Simon know. We'll work with them. That's what we're doing. We are looking for women from ward level, constituency level, Senate, governors, if they're there, and then we start pushing them. That's what we have been given. That is what democracy has given us, the right to make that decision for ourselves. Thank you.
I have no words. Great team. And I think we live in ignorance, I included. They have taken us through the whole process of what our rights are. It's given us a very good context of our country, because at times you listen to people talk and you know this one has only come from maybe Central Kenya, comes to Nairobi, the story ends there. They've never said food somewhere like or wherever, and you see things that will make you feel like you want to shed tears. Thank you, Lacey, very much. And then the other thing, the roles and responsibilities. We have a role, we have a responsibility, we have rights, which we relinquish. We allow others to come and, snatch from us our rights. So it's been great listening to both of them. Too much has been said. We have to digest and put the pieces together and see how we move forward. We can be able to make a change at a personal level. So we will have a question and answer session for about 30 minutes before we wind up. So are there questions? And once you have a question, you can say whether you're directing it either to Charles or to Daisy. Oh, he's there. He's already there. Thank you. Go ahead. I hadn't seen him. Give him the microphone.
My name is Dubai, and I just want to say how grateful I am. I actually am so happy that I came to this seminar today. It's an exaggeration. It is an understatement to say that we have learned a lot. However, let me be brief on this, and I think the question for me is from both of them. You know, something that Father Alfonso said in his before the prayer, or was it after prayer? He mentioned something about the common good. He did. Later on, we heard about this common good. And as Daisy was concluding, it's like all we have to do is call these people, let them tell us what they are going to do for us, and then we have the right people. Unfortunately, the problem that we have seen is that even among our own Christians, these people come to us with very good agenda, telling us what they are going to do for us. Unfortunately, once they get in there, and it is something mysterious. I didn't see all of them, of course. Some of them, many of them, completely change tune and they do exactly what the others are doing. I think for me the question is this common good. What happened to that common good so that it is now replaced by our own individual selfish interests? I happen to be involved at the moment, training young people for leadership, African, new leadership. And our biggest question at the moment is, what happened in traditional Africa, where there was very good leadership because they valued common good and they put it before the individuals? At what point did that change so that today all African, most African leaders have absolutely no regard for the common good? Everybody is looking at themselves, their own selfish interests. If you can help us understand this, I think it will help. Thank you so much.
We'll take two other questions before we get responses, but also be very brief and precise as to what your question is, in the interest of time.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Isaiah Mweteri. I first of all want to thank the two speakers. Actually, we've learned a lot. My question is directed to the two of you. There are instances where people have gone to court because maybe they think that whatever is happening, for example, what the government is doing to some extent, is something that is contrary to maybe the law or against the constitution. And the courts have spoken, and actually they have said that the government is doing wrong, but this government to some extent ignores those orders and the things just go on as if nothing has happened. So my question is, are there some instances where, for instance, the government is allowed to assume that they can ignore the rulings of the court just because they think that it is for the best interest of the country? Thank you.
Another question? There is one at the back.
God is good. So my name is Robert Drama. I'm a social worker by profession, and I've been a member of CJPC in this parish for a long time. But now I'm coming from Moja Catholic Church, our Lady of Assumption. Since I'm following what is happening in our country, and I want first and foremost to thank the speakers, the presenters, Mr. Kajama, and our lady, I cannot pronounce her name very well. And really my question is this. We are all aware now, and every Kenyan is aware now, we have an elephant in our house, or there is a snake in our house. How are we going to kill this snake? And we have a short and a limited time, as we have said. I've heard very well the discussion and the presentation, but still, we have our youth. We have our majority, and we have our big, the so-called politicians who are competing very well. But to be honest and to be precise, there's nothing new they are telling us. We might say we are tired to hear what they are doing. They are telling us every day, going around the country. Last week, or this week, if you can say, the Catholic bishop has spoken. How are these matters which they have raised going to be implemented before we see the change in our country? Is there anything like CJPC we can do machinally? Because we know the Catholic bishops and maybe the priests are talking from a different angle. But we were on the ground. For example, me, I work in Kibera, in the slums, and I can tell you for free, what is happening there is horrible. Personally, I was a victim of COVID-19. I suffered, I went to ICU, and I know what it means. What will happen to that common person? I was pursuing for the NHIF kind of compensation, and I was told NHIF is not covering COVID-19. What about the common person who is raising the money, but he cannot do anything, especially when it is the problem? Thank you.
So, 3 questions.
I'll give my opinion on the question. So the first question was, these people come with a good agenda, but when they get it, they change. One of the things that I found is that in Kenya, our engagement ends at the ballot. Okay? We cast our vote, and then we sit back and complain. We hardly engage with our politicians. And so there needs to be citizen engagement. I wonder, just out of curiosity and by a show of hands, how many of you have actually attended a public participation meeting? Public participation meeting that has been called, because you know by law, the county, before they pass their budgets and all, they call for public participation, parliament and all, okay? How many people actually engage with those processes? Those are some of the issues. The other thing is, the good agenda that they come with, many times it is simply platitudes. I'll give you roads, I'll do this, but they don't tell you how. They don't give you a clear process of how they're going to do this. We are going to reduce tax so that this and this and these things that are actionable that you can hold them to. We don't hold our leaders to account, okay? And that is problematic. And when you do, you are called a nuisance. You know, like okay, on data. Okay, on data is a very active citizen. When things are that is one of the things that we want to raise as part of our complaints, which we will do under the focus of the women that we work together, because it gives unfair advantage. It's against the law, and one of the questions we ask, and we will be asking is, if IBC is not able to enforce the law with regards to campaign time, campaign financing, because you also know that that's another thing that Parliament has thrown out. They forced IBC to re-gazette the Campaign Financing Act and the requirements which constitutionally they are supposed to do. So these are some of the things that are working towards the concerns that people have. We wait to see how what will happen, you know, when we take this, because the only thing that we can do is actually take the matter to court and see how the court will do. But you're right, they are not supposed to be campaigning. Official campaigns are supposed to be usually 90 days before the elections. There's an official campaign time. When you talk about recruiting members to political parties, that happens, and it's a continuous thing. Many of the political parties, when you see by the time they are registered, it means that they are registered members, because the requirement to actually register a member is that you should have at least 1,000 members in at least half the counties. So for you to actually be considered, it means that you've recruited members, and many a time you don't see the recruitment process, you just hear which means carrying out those campaigns. So these are real issues, and those are real issues that must be addressed. With regards to women reps, one of the things that you need to understand about the women rep position is it was thought out as an affirmative action position. One of the key pillars of the Constitution 2010 is the principle of inclusion. And part of that inclusion is the inclusion of previously marginalized groups and non-discrimination under Article 27. So the state is required to take legislative policy and programs, including affirmative action programs. So the county woman rep is a seat that has been set aside for women because we know that there are several barriers to women being elected. That range from cultural, economic, social exclusions. And so this seat was actually provided so that every part of the country would actually have
So when the government
together, if you look at how Kanu and Moi were defeated in 2002, it was through collective action. People came together and they knew the issues that they needed. We must come together. We must have mechanisms that bring us together on issues that we are agreed upon for our country. Because I agree with you, it is an elephant in the room. It is also a tiny one. There are too many people who are suffering. And the common Mwananchi is suffering more than any. But where is their voice? Who will be their voice? And how do we bring those voices together? That is the thing. Are we willing to come together and make demands on the state? That is really the question.
Thank you. I think Daisy has answered very well the question. So I'll just add something brief on the question of the common good, which was the first question. The first question was about the common good. How come it's been replaced by selfishness? First, each of us, I mentioned, probably has a selfish gene in our body, but we also have a generous gene. So those two genes are competing. And it's for us to ensure that the dominant gene, or the one that expresses itself, is a generous gene. What happened in our traditional African culture is that there were structures that facilitated or encouraged people to come together and work towards the common good. So we had a communitarian philosophy. Our modern lifestyle, which is basically Western, focuses more on individual, it's more immaterial. So what we need to do is to supplement the individual dimension, which is important and positive, with the communitarian dimension. We need to have both. Our constitution mentions both. It says we are committed to pursuing the well-being of individuals, the nation, families, the communities, and the nation. This is in the preamble of the constitution. So we need to find mechanisms for doing that. First of all, you do it as an individual, then you come together with others, form organizations, associations, or initiatives to do that. And then we can spread that common agenda. And the political cycle is a cycle that is very well suited to focus on the common. Even as you are assessing candidates, as you are assessing the agenda, as you are pushing your agenda so that it becomes part of the agenda of the politicians, focus on the issue of the common good. Chinua Achebe asked, where did the rain start beating us? When he was reflecting on how African countries lost, African societies lost this focus on the common good. We embraced very many good things from the West, but at the same time we abandoned some of our positive cultures. And the way forward is to start doing it gradually, and each of us can think of how to do it. If it is CJPC, you can come up with initiatives which focus precisely on promoting this communitarian philosophy, promoting activities and initiatives that will help to instill the common good. And even having a way of assessing politicians by how their behavior and their policies promote the common good. Isaiah asked about people who have gone to court and court orders have been issued and then they're disobeyed by government. And is it okay if the government disobeys a court order for the sake of the common good? You see, the problem is that the executive is only one of the three arms of government. Even the judiciary is part of government. It's the judicial arm of government. So they are all organs and offices in government. Government doesn't really disobey court orders. It is individuals who purport to be acting for government who do so. And the question is, where do they get the authority? Because the law doesn't give them the authority to disobey court orders. If you find there is a court order that you feel is not supporting the common good, there are mechanisms. Because some court orders are issued that probably are mistaken or have not been issued after considering all the facts. And there are mechanisms in the law to appeal, to seek review, to seek a stay. So when the government officers, some of them decide to disobey court orders, then you end up with a situation of impunity. Where do you end? Where do you stop? Everyone starts disobeying court orders that are against them. And why did we go to court in the first place? Because we couldn't agree amongst ourselves. So if people start disobeying court orders, you end up with a situation of anarchy. So part of common good is to allow other people who have been given a responsibility or authority for the common good to perform their work. We've all agreed that judges are the ones to decide cases where there is a dispute. So we must allow them. That is part of facilitation of the common good. And that means obeying court orders should be in the best interest of the country. Sometimes court orders are very bad. In America, there is a court order that was issued in 1973 in the case of Roe versus Wade. And as Catholics and Christians, we say that that court order which allowed any person to have an abortion all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason whatsoever, that was a bad court order. So what do you do when there is a bad law or an immoral law? The first thing is that you yourself as an individual, if there is an immoral law, don't do what is contrary to your faith or contrary to your beliefs as an individual. But does it mean now that if somebody else decides to go and do an abortion, that you are going to commit violence upon them? You see how that is different. You are going beyond yourself. If it is in America, where the law has said it is legal, even if you believe it is immoral, if you now commit violence on that person, you are harming the common good. So this is very interesting. You have a law that might be immoral, but because it is there, you cannot solve it by committing more harm. You have to try to change the law. And many Christians in America for the last almost 50 years have been trying to change the law. They have not yet succeeded. So that is what you have to do as an individual and even as an officer of government, where you find there is a law or a court order that you think is unjust. And Robert asked a question. This question was quite long, and there was a section about a section of the question. There is very little time. Like now, elections are coming soon. There are so many things to be done. When will we accomplish them? We might not succeed. And the answer is yes, none of us is perfect. None of our initiatives will be 100% successful. You do the little you can. That is the most important thing. Do the little you can. One of the messages that I love from Mother Teresa of Calcutta, or St. Teresa of Calcutta, is where she says that the thing that drove her, the spirit that drove her to do the things she did, she said was the idea that each of us can do something little, something beautiful for God. So it doesn't need to transform the world, but you do something beautiful for God. That's what St. Teresa of Calcutta said. And she also said that in the area of generosity, the standard of generosity, give until it hurts. So don't focus so much on whether you've succeeded, but give until it costs you something. Because if your giving doesn't cost you, if for example it's a sadaka ya kanisa,
and the money you give in Sadaka doesn't cost you at all, you're not giving enough. If it is being involved in the political process or in social concern, and it doesn't cost you, in fact, you don't even notice, you have not been sufficiently generous. So in answer to this question about the time is short, don't worry if the time is short. Focus on what you can do and let it cost you something. Feel the effort, and then definitely you'll be going in the right direction.
The last one, if they are there. Any other question? There's one there.
Just like a ranger, it's just a concern. Okay, I don't think the area that was focused about this. So I just decided to stand up there. But that's a question. Now, thank you for your Java is here. And you have also mentioned about Ontata. You know, by the singing on TV. Now my question is, how do we start acting? Because we can sit here and say this and this and this, but how do we start acting? Like now, my main question is this. According to the Constitution, when are we supposed to start campaign? How many months before elections? That is my question. Then, if it is 2 months or 3 months, why have we started having campaigns? And we are not doing anything, refusing these campaigns. Maybe, okay, they want to recruit people in their political parties. Why can they come up with other social whatever or registering their people without campaigns? Like they open a book, okay, I want to be in UDM, you register here. I want to be free project, okay, there are so many parties which are coming in. Why don't we come with a system of registering without campaigning? Because according to the constitutions, we are not supposed to have campaigns, and we are having campaigns right now. That is my question.
Is there another question? Thank you, Justa. There's one.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is James Kenyani. For this, she happened to mention something about women involvement, but there is a category of women we elected. These are the women reps in the 47 counties of Kenya. They don't seem to be quite anywhere in the picture. Maybe Daisy can highlight what are the real roles of these people and how can they really help women in their various counties. Thank you.
The last question, is there another one?
Mrs. Karanda, you are a lady of my own heart, and I think the party is true. The party issued a statement, I think almost a month ago, clearly stating that there should be no campaigns. In the usual form and fashion, it has been ignored. So all the campaigns that we see right now are illegal campaigns. That is one of the things that we want to raise as part of our complaints. Which we will do under the class of the women that we got together, because it gives unfair advantage. It's against the law, and one of the questions we ask, and we will be asking is, if IBC is not able to enforce the law with regards to campaign time, campaign financing, because you also know that that's another thing that Parliament has thrown out. They forced IBC to re-gazette the Campaign Financing Act and the requirements which constitutionally they are supposed So these are some of the things that are working towards the concerns that people have. We wait to see how what will happen, when we take this, because the only thing that we can do is actually take the matter to court and see how the court will do. But you're right, they are not supposed to be campaigning. Official campaigns are supposed to be usually 90 days before the elections. There's an official campaign time. When you talk about recruiting members of political parties, that happens, and it's a continuous thing. Many of the political parties, when you see by the time they are registered, it means that they have registered members, because the requirement to actually register a member is that you should have at least 1,000 members in at least half the counties. So for you to actually be considered, it means that you've recruited members, and many a time you don't see the recruitment process, you just hear which means that they have been carrying out those campaigns. So these are real issues, and those are real issues that must be addressed. With regards to women reps, one of the things that you need to understand about the women rep position is it was thought out as an affirmative action position. One of the key pillars of the Constitution 2010 is the principle of inclusion. And part of that inclusion is the inclusion of previously marginalized groups and non-discrimination under Article 27. So the state is required to take legislative policy and programs, including affirmative action programs. So the county woman rep is a seat that has been set aside for women, because we know that there are several barriers to women being elected. That range from cultural, economic, social exclusions. And so this seat was actually provided so that every part of the country would actually have a member elected that is a female. So the fact that they're called women rep is because those seats are set aside for you to vie on that seat. You must be a woman. All other seats are dual gender seats. They are open for anybody, whether male or female. But the seat of the woman rep, the county-based seat for National Assembly, is set aside specifically for women. That's why they are called women reps, because the Constitution says that that person must be a woman. So they are not there to represent only women. Remember that the woman representative is elected by universal suffrage. And what is her role? Her role is the same as the members of parliament, because she sits in the National Assembly, and we know that the role of the National Assembly is representation, legislation, and oversight. This is the role of the woman rep. It is the same as the 290 dual gender representatives, although they do have a kitty similar to the CDF that members of parliament have, which is called the National Affirmative Action Fund, which is administered under the woman rep and is assigned a certain amount per constituency. So that is the role of this woman rep. And so many people ask the question of what is her role. Her role is to represent, to legislate, and to oversight, like every other member of parliament. I hope that answers your question.
I can give a few comments and also my final remarks, because I think we are finishing. And I'll say regarding the question about when campaign starts, I have in the last 2 or 3 elections handled election petitions. Election petitions are these court cases that happen after the elections, where one person is challenging the results. And I remember in one of the cases I cross-examined some of the witnesses and asked them, why were you campaigning before the election period started? And the words they used is they said we were sensitizing voters and we were mobilizing. And the truth is that I actually reflected on in that election petition, and I studied the cases. And I did not find any election petition case or decision where the question of engaging voters before the official campaign period was treated as a disqualifying factor for a person who's been elected. And the reason is because the Constitution of Kenya 2010 has a provision on freedom of expression. That is Article 32 of the Constitution, actually Article 33, sorry. And it also has a provision on political rights, which is Article 38. It has another article on freedom of assembly, Article 36. So when you look at the chapter of the Bill of Rights, it contemplates that people can talk, can organize groupings and talk to them at any time that they want to. That is the Constitution. And the Constitution is consistent with the constitutions of many other countries in the world. So when the Elections Act talks about the official campaign period, if you interpret it as taking away the right to speak about your political agenda before the period starts, you'll actually be inhibiting political rights. This is what happened in Tanzania when Magufuli was trying to stop his opponents from going around the country mobilizing. The government of the day or the incumbent always has a kind of an advantage, because they're always having occasions to speak about what they are doing, what they have done. And the people who tend to have a challenge are the ones who are campaigning for seats which they don't currently hold. So my own view is that the one time when it is really a violation to do campaign is at the end of the campaign period. That is the 24 or 48 hours before the election. But that if you have endless and continuous campaigning, it does harm the common good, because instead of focusing on delivering service, you are all the time politicking. But if you make an absolute bar, you are basically saying you cannot talk to people. And that is the problem. And that is why the courts have not made any declaration that it is illegal to campaign before the official campaign period. It's just that during the official campaign period, there are formal structures for campaigning, but there are ways of doing it before. So I personally, this is my personal view, I'm actually not opposed, for example, to what we call the pre-official campaign phase, where candidates for presidency, for governor, for other seats go around and express their interests to possible voters, listen to them, and do the things that they need to do. What I'm opposed to is the way in which it is done. If you do it in the wrong way, either you're attacking other people or you're only talking about elections, you're not talking about development, then there is a problem. But I personally think that if you ask Kenyans not to think about elections until 3 weeks to go, then you are shortchanging the political process. Because you have to start planning and thinking ahead. This is what happens in America. They are always in a political cycle. They have elections every 2 years for House of Representatives. They have elections. Last year they had elections for president. This year they had elections in some states for some gubernatorial and other seats. But they have learned how, in the course of engaging in continuous political conversation, to still get things done. Not to start politicking and stop doing other things. They are able to chew gum and walk at the same time. And I think that's what we need. And the problem with us is that our politics involves ethnic mobilization. And ethnic mobilization stops us from doing the things we normally do. That is why our political conversation tends to harm a country. So it's not the politics itself that's bad, it's the way we are doing our politics. There's a question about the roles of women, which has been answered very well by Daisy. I just want to add one thing, which is that when we say the position is women rep, we don't mean that the women rep's sole role is to take care of the interests of women. We just mean that the gender of those people is female. But once they are elected to serve in their county. The men, the women, the children in the county, everyone in the county who is served by the women rep should benefit from the women rep. If she campaigns to get a road tarmacked in the county, it should benefit everyone in the county. You get it? But of course, there is an understanding in society that because they are women reps, they should also highlight and emphasize women's issues, which is understandable. I just wanted to be clear that as members of parliament, their role is like for any other member of parliament to oversight government spending, to assist the welfare of the people they represent, and to pass laws, which is not necessarily only in matters affecting women. Then the final comment I want to make is just to remind us that it is good we are having this session today on November 14th, and there are 9 months before the next elections. If we can have a target for what we will do during that 9-month period, what initiatives we have, how we will engage others, I think it will be very useful that even every 3 months, for example, you review what have we accomplished. We must have a vision, what we want to do, and then continuous review of what we are accomplishing. And set targets. Some may be very small targets, like in this area. Can we organize a debate for the MCA's candidates of this area? So that next time when we go for the elections, you are not meeting the name of the MCA for the first time, you don't even know who they are. You are voting either based on party or based on the name, because the name comes from your ethnic group, or because you saw some posters. And this is the one who put posters in my neighborhood. So it's the one I'm putting. So that is my part in short. And I believe from here, we can, whatever we do here can be replicated elsewhere. Thank you.
We are getting to a close. We would have loved to continue, but we have learned so much. So once again, thank you very much. I want to take the mic back to the CJC moderator, Wanageche, to give us the last chance.
Thank you, Jane, for emceeing the event for today. And I want to apologize to those who are still here that we really underestimated the content and the time, and therefore the time that we needed to do this. And you can bear with me that it was difficult to stop in the middle of it, because it has been very helpful for me, and I'm sure for you. What I can say is that it is very difficult to summarize. We have taken record of what has been going on, and hopefully maybe we will look at the possibility of editing or picking out what is very critical. The intention of this Civic Education Forum is to give us knowledge, not information, to give us knowledge. And knowledge is only useful if we apply it. You can have information, but we wanted to move it from information to knowledge. And because it is so big, and I like what Charles has said, Let us pick, even if it is only one item. Don't pick 2 or 3 individually. And for us, CJBC, we will try and synthesize what we have gone through and see if there is anything we can pick as together. And like I said at the beginning, this is also a moment that we have been called by the Universal Church for coming together as communion, participating, and also the mission. We have done the participation all year. So what can be our mission? And we have been given some examples of what we can do. So I want to thank you for your patience, for being here till now. And I believe maybe at your level or at Jumia or whatever, you make a proposal. And like I said, for us, CJBC, we will try and see something that we can do together as CJBC and probably involve the parish as such. So I also wanted to appreciate, I am really impressed or appreciate the fact that our 2 guests have been here all this time. I think, anyway, I know we will invite somebody to give a vote of thanks, but I can't miss that. Because they have been very, very useful, and these are people I think feeling from what we have heard from them. They are very useful, and we will say that we want to invite them again and again as their time allows. So with that, I think we will invite Pamela to give a vote of thanks, and then Simon, you want to say anything? Yes. Maybe before that, yes. After the vote of thanks.
God is good. I don't want to keep you for long. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the good work. Mine is to wish you the best and to tell you we are together. On 4th, which will be on a Saturday, all the members of CJBC, you will have a chance maybe to meet the new Archbishop. Will be in Karoli. All members of the Catholic Justice and Peace Commission will be in Karoli for Thanksgiving Mass, and the Mass will start at 10 a.m. on dot. So yours or your duty is just to come. Then secondly, coming Saturday, 20th, the installation of the new Archbishop, and everybody is invited. It is not for the few. We will be at St. Mary's of Gadi, and the Mass will start at 10. And because of some dignitaries, it's very important for you to come early. And if at all you're a member of CJBC, so that you can be identified by the security agencies, it's good to come with the uniform. And then the last three is to wish you the best. And in case of any support you require from our office, we will be there to offer aid appropriately. Our guests, thank you very much, and God bless you. God grant you abundantly, and we will continue to walk this walk together. You will see such kind of engagement here and there, and we are going to disseminate this information with the whole or in the entire archdiocese. Thank you very much, and God bless you. Tusikae sana, niko na safari, I have to catch a flight because we are going to finalize the lenten campaign for the year 2022. Thank you very much. Vote of thanks.
Yeah. Pamela?
This is better.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much. I think we are all tired, but very excited. The moderator started by talking about rebuilding our nation. And indeed, after these great speakers, we have been given the weapons to go and rebuild our nations. I want to start by appreciating Charles. Being a teacher of history and government and CRE, I can tell you I'm the one who has benefited the way he quoted from the Bible. When he was quoting the Bible, I thought he's just good in CRE. For him to be an advocate, I'm sure he did history and CRE that I teach. So when he quoted several biblical verses, I thought that was just the end. And then he gave us a background of citizenship from many articles that was taught many years by Zambaya here, starting with how we got to where we are, with the 2 world wars, the Magna Carta, the role that have been played by several people, the St. Augustine of Hippo, Thomas Aquinas, and Pope Leo XIII, that talks about the new things. And as a teacher, what came into my mind about the new things that probably I would not want to talk about to open a Pandora's box is about the banning of schools today. So probably that is for another day. Daisy probably will talk about it, the democracy and what we have going on in schools. So thank you, Charles, for doing that. If I was to mark his paper, I would give him 98%. For Daisy, we are so happy. I watch her a lot on TV, and Daisy, if I may use words that I use many times in school, you have murdered this democracy. You have done it so well that what I'm going home with is that we do not expect God to give us a watch and we ask God for time. And Charles crowned it by saying that we should be becoming bad, isn't it? We have been empowered as CBJPC leaders, so in our own small ways, we are going to spread this gospel. So thank you so much, Daisy, for doing this. And even, Mugai called you a daughter of Yahweh, but to me, you are a Hebrew woman, and you know what Hebrew women were capable of. So thank you so much. I also want to take this chance to appreciate Mugai. Probably democracy was not used when we chose them, but I think we chose the best. You have given us the best and we are very happy. I also appreciate Father in absentia. He has just left, but remember, he has stayed on with us, which is unlike him. Oh, he's there. So for Father to have stayed with us here throughout, that is very great. I also want to appreciate the moderator for organizing for this, the members of CJPC for listening, and even the parishioners who are not members of the CJPC. So thank you for doing this, and we want to welcome them another time, isn't it? So I want all of us to stand up so that we thank God for this. Before I tell you, Father, probably finish with prayer. I want us to do what is done where I'm born. In a village where I'm born, I thought PLO was the best lawyer, but today I've discovered Charles. So thank you so much, Charles. So members, we want to appreciate them. And where I'm born, something good you do like this. You do like this, isn't it? So, like this. So I want us to clap, and then we crown it by doing like this to them, and you face them like that, isn't it? 1, 2, 3, we go. We clap 3 times, and then we do like this to them. Yes. We go 1, 2, 3. Again. Again. Thank you so much. Please welcome. Come and teach us more. Next time, talk about democracy in schools, Daisy. God bless you so much, Father. Finish for us with prayer. And today, being our MC today, you are great.
I would like to welcome 4 classes has launched the synod with the title for the synodal church, communion, participation, and mission. we must journey. I think that's why we learn also to do politics. So we pray, we say a prayer to St. Joseph, we give glory to in this church of this, thanking also our host, and asking him some direction, some assistance really in taking care of our country. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. And through the intercession of Saint Joseph and the Blessed Virgin Mary,